Oh, good afternoon. Welcome. If you've just joined us, we're coming to you live from our studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. You are watching the Week in Review, of course, the program where we take a look at some of those top stories making headlines this week and, as always, getting South Africans talking. Oh, I am Liezle Wilson. Let's get straight into it. We kick things off by taking a look at the African Christian Democratic Party, the ACDP, holding its National General Council today to reflect on its constitutional amendments and policy proposals. Our reporter, Natasha Peary, in fact, has more on that.
You have various members of the ACDP coming out in their numbers for their National General Conference, and of course you can see over hundreds of them. They're just about to be addressed by their party leader, Reverend Kenneth Moshwe, and we are told that this National General Conference of the ACDP actually started on Wednesday, and today is actually the final day. There you have it. You've got visuals there of the Reverend Kenneth Moshwe and his wife, and of course various NEC members of the ACDP following after. Just shortly, we'll be speaking to Bishop Dalton Adams, who is the chairperson of the party here, in the province. And as we actually speak over these visuals, we'll just be talking to him and just asking him about, the crux and the importance of this National General Conference. Bishop Dalton, thank you so much for joining us at SABC News. Why is it important that the ACDP had to have this National General Conference this weekend?
We came to do some policy amendments in terms of the Constitution. Secondly, we have also elected our new president, which is still the same president, Kenneth Moshwe, and our deputy president, Wayne Thring, and we brought all our 9 provinces here. So we are very excited. We are on the way leading to 2024. That's the main thing why we're here.
And as I'm talking to Bishop Dalton Adams, you can see the leadership of the ACDP walking in here, and of course members of the party very happy. It seems that there is a hive of activity here. Very, very happy as the Reverend and his wife and various members of the party, the NEC members of the party, are walking up to the stage. As you've heard there, Bishop Dalton Adams saying that they will be reflecting on the various policy resolutions of the party, which is economic growth, job creation, the impact of load shedding, mandatory COVID-19 vaccinations. As you know, that the ACDP was quite controversial when it comes to the issue of vaccinations. Some have actually labeled the party as anti-vaxxers, but they weren't really promoting, vaccinations throughout the COVID-19 period. And honestly, there you have the leadership of the party just walking in here, and of course, some of them just reacting to that leadership. If I'll just probably try get a doorstop from the president of the ACDP. Sir, how are you feeling today, and what can we expect from your address?
You can hear the mood here, and you can see the excitement and the confirmation that ACDP is definitely growing. So people are motivated to say change must come in South Africa.
And coalition governments, what is your issue on that?
Well, we are not talking coalition now. We are talking about godly governance. Godly governance. We don't even want to consider coalitions now. Maybe the time will come, but now we are saying we want a godly government.
Anything perhaps on Eskom? We know that load shedding has been a thorn in the flesh of many South Africans. It's been a daily occurrence. We saw that the President Ramaphosa saying that South Africa needs 1.5 trillion rand over the next 5 years for its plans to go into a just energy transition.
Well, money is available. Money has been stolen. And the president knows the people who stole the money. So they must work hard to get that money to pay whatever is needed for that transition. So they mustn't act as if they don't have money. Money is in the pockets of the many politicians, and also money in the banks of those who have looted the state.
Reverend Moshwe, thank you so much. We look forward to your address. And of course, as he was actually talking to us, it seems as if we are load shed again. So, but I do implore you, Mkolisi, to actually stay tuned to Channel 404 SABC News as we bring you all the latest in regards to the National General Conference of the ACDP as it concludes today.
We'll continue to monitor as the ACDP hold its National General Congress. In other news now, the ANC has confirmed that the 55th National Conference of the party will indeed take place as scheduled next month. After convening several branch general meetings recently, the party says it has met the 70% threshold to have a national conference. ANC national spokesperson Pule Mabe has assured that the conference will convene on the 16th of December at Nasrec.
Just over a month to go, thousands of ANC delegates will be participating in the 55th National Conference of the ANC. That's despite some challenges the party faced in holding branch general meetings. The ruling party says the 70% threshold needed to convene a national conference has now been met. Out of the 9 provinces, it's only the Free State and the Western Cape that are yet to have their provincial conferences. And the ANC says what is left now is for all those who wish to participate in the conference to register as delegates.
We've surpassed the 70% mark required to seat a conference. We have said successful meetings that have said of the ANC are now well over 2,700. So by the time we sit by the time we rise next week, we should be sitting with a more bigger number. So we are encouraged by those provinces that have worked hard.
The ANC has requested that all its members who have an interest in being elected to the National Executive Committee of the party continue to declare their donations as they campaign for positions ahead of the national conference. The Electoral Committee, chaired by Kgalema Motlanthe, decided that candidates must make sure that they are not tainted when it comes to financial interests and donations.
The Electoral Committee has a right to demand further particulars and to inspect bank statements of candidates, campaigns and campaign workers, and to interview members of campaign teams. In accordance with the rules approved by the National Executive Committee, all comrades who are campaigning for various NEC positions during the 55th National Conference are instructed to submit the name of their campaign manager and fundraiser, budget for the campaign with expenditure items, source of donations in funds or in kind, a full statement of income and expenditure.
Now, some branch meetings are still taking place this weekend. With almost all the branch meetings having taken place across the country, the ANC says now it's ready to host yet another successful conference of the party in December. Abongile Dumago, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Right, let's leave it there for now. Take a quick ad break. There's more on the other side upon a return. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We continue with the week in review. The private sector says it will intensify efforts to play a more active role in the fight against gender-based violence and femicide, but needs integrity to be prioritized. The sector is also looking into ways to make more funding available. This comes as activists demand stronger measures and more support from government and the private sector to eradicate the scourge.
As frustrations were laid bare by survivors of gender-based violence, many were triggered. After holding government to account at the 2-day summit this week, those in the front line of this relentless fight say it's back to actually doing the hard work. But first, they need money.
Where is the money? We need money to be able to do the work. Yesterday, I was going through the reports and I saw money has been spent, but it wasn't broken down so that we can understand where.
Funding. And I'm saying this because we have quite a lot of civil society organizations that are implementing the work, that are the corridor for government, for corporate South Africa, in the communities that are affected the most.
While government has allocated billions to fight GBVF, the private sector will also play its part. Business Unity South Africa says a more inclusive and transparent partnership will fast-track matters.
We're definitely on the periphery of the discussion. It shouldn't be like that. We are not part of the mainstream conversations around GBV. There is work to be done from the private sector side, but there's also work to be done from government side in terms of inclusion and making sure that all the social partners are equally included as well. Because, we made this point throughout our negotiations on the NGBVF bill that is now in Parliament, that we wanted to have one place where we can coordinate efforts and where we can bring all of business together and say this is where we're channeling our efforts instead of having all these piecemeal interventions.
Social Development says over 8 billion rand is allocated annually to about 1,600 organizations.
I indicate 8.2 billion per year. That is a sizable amount of money that goes to NPOs, and that is not necessarily including also the money that I'm talking about, that it comes from the National Development Agency. That is not only comes out of the other different units that we have.
Those who feel that the money is distributed dubiously must inform authorities.
There is no way that the Department of Social Development distributes money in any dubious way. We have an accountability process. We've got a process which many of the NPOs and NGOs knows. Those who feel there is money that has been distributed through dubious means, they know exactly what to do.
Meanwhile, the police have also committed to deal with challenges that has made it difficult to adequately respond to victims of GBVF.
More than 3,000 people are raped in their own places, in their own houses. While 1,000 people in that period were counting about, they are raped in the parks, the beaches, the streets and all, which means families and communities, they'll have to really play the big role, and that will be the prevention part of dealing with it.
SABC has also made more funds available towards the battle. Patricia Fasage, SABC News.
And now the news, the second annual 4th Calata Memorial Lecture will start shortly in Claremont in the Eastern Cape. The lecture is hosted by the 4th Calata Foundation, where Calata and 3 others, Matthew Goniwe, Sparrow Mkonto and Sicelo Mhlauli, better known as the Cranach 4, were murdered by the security police back in 1984 for their involvement in the liberation struggle. This year, the discussion panel is made up of, amongst others, Dr. Alan Busak, Konahali Gugushe, the daughter of Mapekla Mohapi Zalda Holtzman, the former head of Parliament Security, as well as community activist Sebo Somzi Mdwalaza. The panel will engage on the topic of ethical leadership at large. Zolani Moya is at the Cranach 4 Garden of Remembrance for the Sinwal.
A very good day and warm welcome to the viewers who are watching from different parts of the country. Well, the second annual 4th Calata Memorial Lecture is on full swing at Cranach in the Eastern Cape, which is about 3 hours away from Gqeberha. With me here, I am joined by Dr. Alan Busak, who needs no further introduction. Obviously, 4th Calata, so from part of the famous Cranach 4, who are known globally for their stance against apartheid. Do you think, personally, 4th Calata would have been more happier with the current political climate in South Africa?
No, I think it would be immensely unhappy with what has been happening. Not only with the general climate in South Africa, our people are basically in despair, either in despair or wrestling with an anger that they don't know where to go to. He would be very unhappy with the state of the African National Congress, the factionalism that has wrecked that organization and sort of riding it like some devil. Nobody knows where to. He would be very unhappy with the performance of some of the leadership of the African National Congress. This is not what the man fought for. This is not what he died for. This is not what his children deserve and his people deserve. And so, no, I think he would be very, very unhappy if he knew.
Do you think the younger generation of leaders can actually draw inspiration from his teachings of bravery?
Oh, without a doubt. Oh, without a doubt. I've been going around the country. I've been speaking to schools and to young people in churches in everywhere. And I hold up the Cranach 4 as the model of leadership that we need, that Steve Biko called the kind of selfless revolutionaries that they were, willing not just to do whatever is necessary at the time, but willing to hold up their own dreams and aspirations for themselves and to lay their lives on the line for the future and for the generation. So, that is the model of leadership, not the current leadership that we have. These people are the model of leadership that are us young people.
Thank you very much, Doc. I know that we've got a very, very, very hectic schedule going forward, but thank you very much for speaking.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Well, one of Fort Calata's children, Mr. Lucanio Calata, who has over the years raised quite a number of fundamental issues, particularly with government. Mr. Calata, thank you very much for availing yourself to speak to us at the SABC.
Thank you, Bob. We appreciate this opportunity, and we appreciate you guys coming here and being part of the second annual Fort Calata Memorial Lecture.
Do you think government has done enough to honor the legacy of Craddock 4?
No, not at all. It's hard to even start talking about the legacy of the Craddock 4 when there hasn't even been justice yet for the Craddock 4. So, and I think that is the starting point where we still need to see people being prosecuted and held accountable for the murders of the Craddock 4. Then thereafter we can then start talking about their legacies and kind of creating the kind of society that they died for.
What is our Fort Calata's foundation all about? Are there any plans going forward? What is it that you are seeking to achieve?
Well, we're seeking to do a number of things, but primarily we want to firstly keep the memory of Fort Calata alive. We want to keep the memory of his comrades, Matthew Goniwa, Sparom Kontos, Mhlauli alive. We want to create the kind of society that they died for. We want to ensure that the things that was dear to them, things like education, things like music, things like a better life for each and every South African, that those things are materialized. So that's really, yes, I'm giving you a very broad picture, but that's really the kinds of things that we want to do. We want to honor his memory by realizing the society that he lived for.
That was Mr. Lucanio Calata, basically telling us about the plans that the foundation has in terms of improving the standard of education as well as to improve the lives of the poor in South Africa. Well, that's a wrap, and it's back to you in studio.
All right, welcome back. We continue with the weekend review. Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa says South Africa will need about 1.5 trillion rand over the next 5 years to meet targets in transitioning from coal to renewable energy. It says that the $8.5 billion pledged by industrialized nations at COP26 last year was nowhere near enough, and that he would be negotiating for more at COP27.
President Ramaphosa will take a 163-page Just Transition Investment Plan to the international funders at COP27 in Egypt next week. The 5-year plan aims to move the country from the current high carbon emission from electricity generation to cleaner sources of energy. It also seeks to clean the gap in the current electricity deficit. The president will have to convince investors that the country has what it takes to deliver on its just energy transition plan. South Africa has been battling to deal with its energy crisis despite billions of rands spent on improving its power generation capacity.
We face a shortfall in electricity supply which has caused our economy immense damage and continues to destroy jobs and livelihoods. It's put a number of businesses in great difficulty. Some have had to shut down. So this is a real crisis, and its enormity is widespread throughout the country.
President Ramaphosa says the country needs more money than what it's been given, and this will be top of the agenda at the COP27 in Egypt.
While the initial funding committed by partner countries will play an important catalytic role, it is not sufficient to meet the scale of our ambition. And in going to COP27, that's precisely the message that we will be taking forward. Supporting a just transition requires adequate financial support that must include a significantly larger grant funding component to ensure the implementation of active labor market policies, reskilling, upskilling, as well as the creation of new industries on a considerable scale.
The president also says South Africa's energy transition plan is like no other in the world and will leave no one behind. He criticized the developed countries for the empty promises they made at the summit held in Paris.
The promise that was put out in Paris that they would make available up to $100 billion a year so that all of us can transit in a much more effective way in terms of the support that we need, the mitigation that should be there, and how we should adapt. That promise was never really fulfilled. Now, even as we move forward, as we should, given the exposure we have to climate change, we remember what has happened in the recent past. And it is for this reason that we are emboldened to argue and agitate for more funding.
On Monday and Tuesday next week, President Ramaphosa will join other heads of states and governments in Egypt for the Summit of World Leaders. Ntantla Katlani, SABC News, Johannesburg.
All roads lead to Egypt for the COP27 climate talks. For 12 days, world leaders, climate scientists, negotiators, activists, and other stakeholders will take stock of the planet's future. African scientists, on the other hand, are ready to provide scientific evidence of the impact and damage of climate change, as well as innovative solutions to mitigate the crisis.
Sharpening their knowledge to solve problems associated with climate change, from blistering heat conditions, droughts, floods and changes in rainfall patterns. For Africa, the climate crisis has also become a health crisis. These scientists say Africa will soon have to deal with more waterborne and mosquito-induced infections. This is because mosquitoes are now spreading to more habitats as the temperature gets warmer. They're calling for more investment in epidemic preparedness planning to prevent disease outbreaks from occurring in parts of the continent, where infectious diseases such as malaria are still a major problem.
For the Africa to be able to cope, there has to be a support mechanism, especially from developing countries, to make sure that they consider to have a package that will help, is going to help Africa to cope in terms of mitigating and adapting to the impact of climate change, in terms of the package for loss and damage, for all these consequences on health that we are seeing that are occurring in Africa at the moment.
While these scientists believe that developing countries must do more to reduce carbon emissions, their focus is on finding African solutions to global problems that hits the continent the hardest. Scientists from Uganda have come up with a new clean energy solution in the country that is heavily reliant on charcoal.
We have come with an innovation in northern Uganda, which we call green energy. The green energy is basically agricultural residues, which has been charred and mixed with a binder, such as cassava starch, and then compressed into a solid fuel, which can be used as a substitute for charcoal. It is a more sustainable energy for our country because it helps to reduce the deforestation and its climate change impacts.
This scientist from Ghana who's studying the compose of trees found in the savanna of the West African nation. All of this in the quest to boost rural women's ability to earn a living from planting trees.
For trees and women, we are approaching it this way, where we are looking at the products that they are already producing from the trees. So for example, baobab, the fruits and the oil that they get from the baobab, we are now trying to find new and improved products from that, and also access to markets that would increase their income. So if they get more income from their produce, they are likely to nurture and preserve the trees.
There are even more innovative interventions in waste management and recycling. Scientists also want accountability.
We are breeding insects for waste recycling. Message for COP27 leaders is that we need action. And to our leaders in Kenya is that we need to hold them responsible for the promises they've given us, and especially when they say that they are planning to plant 15 billion trees in the next 10 years to arrest the climate change.
Next week, Egypt will host COP27 at Sharm el-Sheikh, where participants will review the implementation of the many commitments made to mitigate the looming climate crisis and to add new ones.
Our primary schools in India's New Delhi will be closed from today amid severe air pollution crisis. Home to some 20 million people, Delhi has been ranked the most polluted city in the world and is cloaked every winter in a thick blanket of smog.
Delhi's air quality index breached the severe and hazardous categories on Thursday, meaning that the city's 20 million residents are effectively breathing in smoke. According to data from the Central Pollution Control Board, the AQI exceeded 450 in many places. A reading over 400 affects healthy people with serious impacts on those with existing diseases. Before the school closures were announced, some parents were torn about whether their children should be going.
When we wake up in the morning, we feel that we should not send our children to school. The condition is so bad that when we go to our balcony, we feel difficulty in breathing. But it is a matter of their education, so we take precautions and send them. We always fear about the effects of pollution on our children's health. This is a matter of concern, as with each passing year, the situation is getting worse.
When I step out, my eyes become watery. There's pain in my throat, but there's no point missing out on school because COVID has already caused huge loss to their studies. So we can teach our children to wear masks.
Alarmed by the high levels of pollution, India's Federal Pollution Board has banned the entry of diesel trucks carrying non-essential goods into the capital. Most construction and demolition work has also been stopped to curb dust pollution, and residents have been told to work from home when they can and reduce the use of coal and firewood. The world's most polluted capital is blanketed in smog every winter as cold, heavy air traps construction dust, vehicle emissions and smoke from the burning of crop.
In other news, the World Bank has approved South Africa's loan of almost $500 million. This will pay to transition the country onto a low-carbon development path. The bank says decommissioning the Komati coal-fired plant in Mpumalanga will help reduce carbon emissions. But analysts say that the country can't afford to take foreign currency loans due to the weak rand, and that reducing carbon emissions by replacing coal-fired power stations with wind and solar is misguided.
The World Bank says the repurposing of the Komati plant will enhance energy security in South Africa. It says the power sector is a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions in South Africa, accounting for 41% of its CO2 emissions, and that the aim is to move away from an old and inefficient coal-fired power fleet and to scale up the use of renewables by 2030. But analysts say that this move will not help to improve Eskom's efficiency and reduce load shedding.
The last unit to be shut down was operating at over 75% energy availability factor. So they want to tell us that in the next 2 to 3 years, they will bring on board the so-called renewables, whose energy availability factor is way less than 25%. So it doesn't make sense at all.
Kadima reiterated that this loan will put a heavy financial burden on government and has called on government to consider deploying renewables off-grid to avoid high tariffs for electricity.
In fact, this loan and the very decision to shut down coal-fired power stations carries with it a heavy financial burden, because Eskom, when it releases its financial results, which are already delayed by more than 2 months, when it releases them, it will have had to take an impairment charge where they have to write off 15,000 megawatts of capacity that they had on their books.
The World Bank says the project will create economic opportunities to benefit 15,000 people, and that community-driven projects, skills training and business development services are expected to create jobs in agriculture, manufacturing and digital technology. Naledi Matlapeng, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Right, for more, let us bring in Dr. Azwi Fanele Nemashungwa, economics lecturer at the University of Venda. Very good afternoon to Dr. Azwi. Thank you for joining us here on the SABC.
Afternoon to the listeners of SABC.
Let's delve into some of the stories that have come through, perhaps, come to the fore, perhaps as we look at some of the conditions of the loan that has been accepted. What concerns arise for you?
So immediately I hear about this additional loan that comes to South Africa, especially after South Africa was given a loan in June, which amounted, I believe, is above 700,000. So one can say that if we want to go for another loan for now, knowing that institutions like the World Bank, IMF, are those institutions that you cannot just get a loan from them without conditions being made. Though sometimes they cannot be made explicitly, but we know that there are underlying issues or underlying conditions that they are there. Sometimes we find that those countries, learning from experience, countries that happen to have get loans from World Bank and IMF, at the end of the day, they end up being the parties of these institutions, and most of the time they fail to make repayment. And then we can say that even though South Africa is showing that it is in a state of despair, because if we always run to World Bank when we have a problem, so it shows the crisis that South Africa is as a country. So I can say this is not a good idea at all.
Well, you're speaking of the concerns, and obviously this has implications. As you mentioned and alluded to, the second loan that has been approved now by the World Bank in less than 6 months. When we look at, some of these payback conditions, perhaps as how it's also going to affect future generations who, inevitably are going to have to bear the brunt of these decisions going forward.
So I believe, like I said, if we see that South Africa gets a loan in June, now it's less than 6 months, we are running again to the World Bank to get another loan. So, like I said, we are showing that we're in a state of despair. So, if we are still trying to pay a loan, that I believe is becoming a debt to the country. Listening to the speech from the finance minister, one can say that South Africa is in a state where our debt is above a level that is undesirable. So, going back to get another loan of 9 billion from the same institution. So, number one, you can say that this is a sign that the country is saying that it has a problem that it cannot solve. Because if we're talking of maybe fiscal consolidation, and only to find that the country is now going back in reverse to get another loan, I don't think that is a good idea. Because by the time the minister announced that they're going to help Eskom, there was a question at the back of every South African's mind to say, where will they get the money? But now we know that the only option that they have is to run for this, which is not something good for the country.
So, Dr. Azwi, then, as we, begin to reimagine the ways forward, we also have to look at the options at hand. We're obviously looking at the long-term solutions, but there are immediate concerns that come about. Energy, the state of Eskom, SOEs is definitely, one that has been a hot topic of late. The World Bank, saying that the project to decommission and repurpose the Komati coal-fired power plant using renewables and batteries would also in a sense, create opportunities for the affected workers and communities. How would you weigh in on that justification, just given the precarious situation South Africa finds itself in at this juncture?
So, unfortunately, that statement is not coming from analysts, it's coming from the government to serve that, and also the World Bank, because when they say that will be a good opportunity or it will help the country to create jobs, unfortunately, we have been getting this loan for some time. Only to say that there is no any clear trajectory of job creation in South Africa. So what will make difference in having this amount if we say we're going to create jobs for poor South Africans or those people who live maybe in rural areas and agriculture? So we have been seeing this trend for some time. So I believe that is a statement that they're trying to use in order to send a positive message to the country. But we know that South Africa has been getting money from different financial institutions, from the IMF, from all these different institutions, international institutions. So I don't think there is any change that these funds will make, except that it will worsen the debt situation in South Africa.
Now, Dr. Azwi, just very quickly, before we conclude the conversation, earlier on I said President Cyril Ramaphosa says South Africa needs about 1.5 trillion rand over the next 5 years to meet targets in transitioning from coal to renewable energy, basically alluding to the fact that he's going to be negotiating for more at COP27 this time. And I wonder, as we look at the dynamics that have unfolded the world over to date, I mean, we have to look at this in context, right? Go back in history and understand who the major contributors were, to this pollution that it seems developing countries are now at the mercy of. They're the ones that are obviously bearing the brunt. What situation should be unfolding in that, firstly, for these developed countries to be taking responsibility, perhaps also ensuring that there's more leeway for developing countries, to be assisted in a meaningful manner that, equals the playing field without abdicating responsibility for the situation and how we've ended up here, perhaps how it's also then subsequently affected South Africa amongst other countries.
So if I get your question well, I think if we look at what is happening around, especially in Africa in general, so we have realized that the problem in Africa is something that is continuing forever. So we need to find that instead of coming up with permanent solutions to the problems, we look at things that don't create solutions. So unfortunately, I believe our leaders don't have a solution for now. All over the world, especially in these poor countries, because most of the time we find that instead of taking the blame as a country or taking the blame as leaders, they will try to look at for other things to take the blame onto. So unless we can come to a realization to say, as a country, as a continent, we have a serious problem, and we sit down and then try to find out what the main challenge or the main problem is. So even if we try maybe to look at opportunities that will try to lessen the problem, I believe this problem will continue for a number of decades, unless there is a change or a paradigm shift in the way we as a country think. Because if there is a problem, instead of solving the problem, we look for opportunities maybe to lessen the problem, only to find that those situations that we think they are bringing solution, instead of bringing solution, they tend to worsen the situation. That's why we find that most of our countries are in a dire situation, and unfortunately, one government will come and another will go, only to find that the solution will continue from generation to another.
Right, it's obviously a situation that the world is watching with bated breath, but mixed reactions coming through at this hour. Dr. Azwi, we're going to leave the conversation there for now. Dr. Azwi Fanele Nemushungwa, economics lecturer at the University of Venda, weighing in on some of the responses on the back of the World Bank having approved South Africa's loan of almost $1 billion, which will pay to transition the country into a low-carbon development path. Again, just looking at some of the pros and cons and implications and concerns, rather, that have come as a result of that approval. So we'll leave the conversation there and just take a quick ad break, because we'll in fact have more on the other side upon our return. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. right, we continue with more news at this hour. Police say 6 people were shot dead, 1 person wounded last night in Claremont, just outside of Pinetown, west of Durban. The 7 people were in a room when gunmen opened fire on them. Police spokesperson Jane Nike has appealed to members of the public who might have any information about the shooting to come forward.
Detectives from the Provincial Organised Crime Unit are appealing to members of the community to come forward with information that will assist them in arresting those involved in the killing of 6 people at Claremont. Last night at 22:30, 6 people were shot and killed while 1 was injured at an informal settlement in Claremont. The 7 men were in a room within the informal settlement when unknown persons opened fire into their abode. Charges of murder and attempted murder are being investigated by the Provincial Organised Crime Unit. Members of the community are urged to come forward with any information that will assist investigators. All information will be treated with confidentiality, and residents are encouraged to use the Crime Stop number, which is 08600 10111, or the MySAPS app to share information. The KwaZulu-Natal Provincial Commissioner, Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Konazi, has condemned the killings and also has urged communities to work with investigators.
In other news, Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi has confirmed that e-tolls will be scrapped once an agreement with the National Treasury is reached. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana has already sounded the death knell for Gauteng's e-tolls when he announced last week that Gauteng would take over 70% of the SANRAL's debt on the project. However, the province must take over 30% of the 43 billion rand debt and future maintenance costs. Lesufi said various proposals to raise revenue were being considered.
We normally get 800 million grant for maintenance as a province from national. We want to call for an increase in this particular grant. We believe that it will assist us to also stagger the payments that we need to pass. So this is the amount that we normally get. We've got prime land parcels. Those are land parcels that are owned by the state, by a provincial government. These land parcels are in Sentin, they are in the Val, Ekurhuleni, West Rand, and major strategic urban areas. So we've got properties like houses, we've got land. So we're bringing them to say we'll put them in the market. Whatever that will raise out of that will also contribute to this. We've also put up a debate that the motor licensing, liquor licensing, and what is commonly known as sin taxes are areas where we have a provincial mandate to do. We will tap into those resources to assist us to really deal with this challenge.
Right, on to another developing story at the South. The EFF Central Command team in the Free State says the new leadership will emerge this weekend and is expected to take the party to greater heights. The party is holding its 3rd Provincial People's Assembly in Bloemfontein. It's hoped that it will pave the way for the renewal of the party. But perhaps for this and more on the story, we are now crossing to our reporter Makhala Masiteng, who is with our camera person Semi Masime. A very good afternoon to you. Thank you for joining us. Perhaps you could just walk us through what is currently transpiring on your end. Talk to us about the nomination process of the top 5 and who are some of those possible nominees.
Well, we are expecting to see the nomination and the voting of the top 5 later today. But at the moment, we've just had an opening address by the EFF's Secretary General Marshall Dlamini, who was addressing the delegates here. But at the core of his address was actually the kind of the leadership that they want to see in the Free State, especially to take the party to the next level. He was talking about the issues around the fact that they want to see the leadership that is able to go on the ground and maximize and speak to the people on the ground and understand the issues that are affecting the people in the Free State, and also indicating that he still questions the fact that the DA is still defeating the EFF in the province, and talking about some of the issues. But I am with him now just to take us through his address. Marshall, thank you very much for joining us. You were talking about the kind of the leadership that you want to see in the Free State. Just take us through that.
Look, it's a conference. The PPA sits each and every 4 years, where we come to take reports and stock and even the leadership. So we were speaking to the delegates in terms of the leadership, because there's no shortcut to leading our people. You can't be a supervisor. We want leaders who are grounded with our communities. Our people, our communities, the whole entire South Africa, including here in Free State, they are hungry for leaders who just who leave their high horses and go to them and listen to them, work with them, build with them, find solutions with them. That's the kind of leadership that we're looking for. Leadership that is available and not working in the interest of our people, not leadership that come after a crisis and then they pretend to be leading. So, and leaders that is available. We're still a young organization. We cannot have a situation where we've got leaders that are not available to work for the EFF every day. That is what is expected on all of us as leadership, and leadership that is honest and that is going to guide the lower structures. As you would know, that some of our members, even at a branch level, some of them, it's the first time they even get into leadership positions, and they need leadership to guide them before they make mistakes and put the organization into trouble. So we need leadership that is going to go there and guide them slowly and teach them how to do things at a branch level.
But up to so far, are you happy with the progress that we have seen in the past 4 years?
Look, we are happy with the progress of EFF here in Free State. We are represented with almost all municipalities to show that we have reached all the corners of Free State. Now we need to consolidate and build stronger and not be complacent and think that the dying of the ANC here in Free State or the collapse, it's an automatic gain of the EFF until we have gone to those people. So we must never be comfortable, we must never be complacent, because that is dangerous to the revolution. So we are happy, we say let's build from here. Again, as I said to the delegates, we must engage on the issues why are we behind DA. We should be at a level now where we're no longer speaking about DA, we're talking of the ANC. Look like now, because they've not done it, they have to double their efforts and bundle them together and remove them 2024.
Let's talk about exactly the 2024. We have seen the party making inroads in various municipalities, as you indicated. We saw Metsimaholo. You had the chance to have the mayor there, but withdrew within few days. But there is also the presence of EFF in Mangaung Metro municipality, where we know that there's really various problems happening there. But what is it that you want to see the EFF doing in the Free State in terms of issues that we see happening in this province?
Look, everything has collapsed in Free State. The EFF must just know that from now they must stop making excuses. They must know that there's no government in Free State. There's here in Mangaung, if you go to the townships, it's a mess. There's no refuge collection. The sewer is just running uncontrollably. The roads are damaged in the entire province. So the EFF leadership, they must ready themselves to lead. That is why even in places like Fezile and everywhere else, on all regions, we need a stronger EFF, because the reality is that there's no longer leadership. This province is on autopilot. That's why even when you want to listen to a person who's supposed to be premier now, you've never heard say anything about development or of this province except about ANC factions. That's what it's occupying their term. Even now, that's what they talk about. If you read about them, it's their factions, and it's an opportunity for EFF to stop paying attention to useless things, but focus on making sure that there's leadership for our people, because our people, they are hungry for leaders here in Free State. There's the entire province, municipalities, including the provincial government has collapsed. And we are right, we're making inroads. Here in the metro, we're holding them accountable. They are right on the verge. They're sitting at 50%, or they are running because of a coalition already. They're on the verge. So we double our efforts. 2024, we've taken over the province, and finally, after so many years, our people, they can get a government that respects them, a government that works for them, a government that listens to them, a government that implements what they want. When you say people first, we're a people's organization. We cannot know until we go to the ground and listen to the people. Then we can be able to provide the solutions as per the people's aspirations.
Thank you very much. That is Marshal Dlamini take us through what they want to see happening come 2024, saying that they are indeed making inroads, but they want to see the leadership going on the ground and maximizing and making sure that the EFF do take the next level come 2024.
All right, thank you very much, Makhala, for that update. A developing story, of course, we'll be monitoring throughout the week. And again, the EFF Central Command team in the Free State says the new leadership will emerge this weekend, expected to take the party to greater heights as the party is holding its third provincial People's Assembly in Bloemfontein in the Free State province. We'll continue to monitor it as it unfolds. Now, in other news, the Special Investigating Unit has been granted an order to seize properties and businesses worth 25 million rand from 9 people implicated in alleged fraud relating to funding by the National Lotteries Commission. They include actress Terry Peto and former Chief Financial Officer Philemon Letwaba. The CIU is investigating a multi-million rand fraud scheme in which the group of people allegedly bought properties through money fraudulently acquired from the NLC. The properties include 9 luxury properties in Pretoria, Centurion, Hartbeespoort and Johannesburg, as well as a luxury car and 2 Ocean Basket franchises on the East Rand. Right, for now, that's where we're going to leave it. Do take care. We'll be back for a look at the week ahead tomorrow. But for myself and the team, until then, it's goodbye for now.